You got the long expected news of David Fry having Tommy John surgery on Monday afternoon from the Guardians. Now we have to talk about the fallout based on his recovery.
Tanner Bagby of the Guardians, and you're listening to Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Welcome to a bonus episode.
Yes, it's a bonus episode of Locked On Guardians. Go back and listen to Top 10 Tuesday, please, if you haven't yet. We talked about the top 10 biggest draft busts in Cleveland baseball history going back to 2000. Had a lot of fun doing that, but we also realized there was some news people want to hear about on Monday as well, and that starts with David Fry. That's the biggest news. You know, honestly, Monday's show, go back and listen to Monday's show. We pretty much predicted everything was going to happen. We said Henches was going to come off the IL and Stephan was going to come off the IL. We debated whether or not Bieber was going to get the qualifying offer. Obviously, he didn't. We both kind of agreed that was not going to happen. Miles Straw was outraged in AAA, and he accepted his assignment because he wants to keep getting paid that contract, so no shock. But the real impactful update that came on Monday from the Guardians was David Fry's Tommy John. So you and I have been talking about this for months now. It was very obvious that this was going to happen because he went from being their Swiss Army knife, playing catcher, first base, outfield, and all of a sudden he just stopped playing positions altogether, was only able to DH, and he had a dip in offensive production at one point, and then we kind of heard late in the season this was coming officially, even though it was pretty obvious. The real piece of this, though, is, we knew this was happening. We were trying to figure out timelines. Cleveland's update on him is that Fry had the hybrid Tommy John where he got the tendon graft reconstruction. So the ligament is reconstructed by Dr. Keith Meister, but also he had the internal brace. The internal brace by itself would have sped up the process of recovery. However, he had the tendon and the brace. So he is recovering on the tendon timeline. So that means he is out 6 to 8 months in terms of hitting, and at least that's what the Guardians are expecting. And then they're talking about a return to play from the field standpoint of 12 months. So as it stands right now, Cleveland is expecting not to have him back on the field to hit until at best May, maybe June. And then he is not expected to be able to play a position in 2025. Jeff, I think this changes some of their plans a little bit for 2025. So I think we thought maybe there was a chance he'd be able to be back on the field next year. And maybe there's some world where he does get back on the field, but I think it would be very unlikely at this point based on the update they gave us. I think this changes things a little bit because now you've essentially got a guy who you thought was going to be a significant contributor in your lineup. He's going to miss at least 2 months of the season, maybe more. And you can only DH him, so that hurts your roster flexibility. That's hurt them in the playoffs, obviously. Do you think this will change their thinking in the offseason in terms of roster construction and first base DH? But we'll get to the Josh Naylor of it all. But do you think this just changes how they have to go out and decide how they're going to handle that position? I guess the Josh Naylor thing factors in here, but do you think this changes things a little bit for them?
I mean, I don't think it does change things, at least from how they're planning to operate, because they knew this was coming. They knew he was going to miss time. I'm sure they probably even knew the degree of the injury and that, like, how serious it was. And it is a big deal. Like, if this was just an internal brace, he might be back by like the first month of the season, maybe just missing. But with the whole gamut of what's going on, this complicates things. You're not counting on him right now. I think whatever you get from David Fry is a bonus next year, and whatever role, I don't think you can quite count on him for anything. Just based on the timeline they gave us, like, maybe it's like you're counting on him from August on as a DH option, but he's also got to build up strength and all that other stuff, and it makes that hard because it's not just the recovery; it's then getting into game shape and action. And this. We talked about Manzardo has never hit lefties in the minors. That's an issue. It does certainly seem to set up for the depending on cost, it's like, does Carlos Santana, even though he's going to be 39, get more money next year coming off a Gold Glove and like his second best season in a long time? Like, I don't know, but he does feel like the ideal guy to come in, especially if they're not going to keep Josh, which I still don't think they are likely to do. So yeah, I am definitely very curious to see how this is going to all pan out for them. It's hard for this team to replace him, but I will say the one upside is they do have a lot of guys who hit lefties. It's not quite as terrible in years past where it's like, okay, he was the one guy who could hit lefties.
Yeah, the left-handed piece of it, I don't think you have to worry about as much. But my question is, like, I kind of thought, does this change how they think about what they'll do with Josh Naylor this offseason? And I don't think it does, because they don't normally operate like that. Like, if you just go back and look at how their history is, number one, there's not a lot of examples of where they've just let guys run into their end of their contract, right? There's Michael Brantley. Shane Bieber got there because of injuries. They would have traded him if they could have, I think. There's just, Jason Kipnis, I know someone pointed out, but they let him run out on his pre-arb, but he had a pre-arb deal. Josh Naylor never signed a pre-arb deal.
Yeah, and by the end of his contract, it was
pretty bad.
It was not good.
Yeah, who was it? Kipnis. Yeah, Brantley did sign a pre-arb deal as well. But they're often guys they have on their team that don't sign deals. They don't let them run out the clock on their contract. No. They usually get something for them. So I just don't think this is going to change that for them. I think they're not going to let another player's issue dictate what they do. I think if they always plan to move Josh Naylor, if they feel like they're going to get the right offer for him, and maybe this makes them do it more. Maybe they feel like they can get something in return for Josh Naylor that helps them this year to be a better team. I don't know what will happen with that, but I don't think this changes their strategy and what they do with Naylor. I saw a lot of people saying too, like, you can't just unload 30 home runs and 100 RBIs in your lineup without having some sort of contingency plan. I 100% agree with that. But again, like you said, they've known for months that this is the likely outcome for David Fry. And I don't think the Josh Naylor situation is affected because I think the plan always has been to, if they get the right offer for him, trade him, because that's just normally how they operate. And I can't imagine they're letting some other situation on the roster. Then you're sort of a prisoner of the moment, right? That's a bad way to be for a baseball team. You become a prisoner of the moment. You become reactive. Like, we can't make this move because of that move. Like, value for them, value is value, right? Like this is why they're so hard to deal with in trades, because they set a value on their player, and this is in trades and this is contracts as well. And they don't budge, right? They're stubborn to a fault, and that can be good. It can be bad. And I think they probably approach roster building the same way, where if they feel like it's in the best interest of the health of the team from a roster and financial standpoint, they're going to make the trade regardless of what else is going on with somebody else in the roster. So I'd imagine that this situation for Naylor, for them, does exist in a vacuum.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like I said, I think the other component with Naylor too is just, do they want to pay $12 million to a first baseman who has had health issues and had declining,
when you've got an in-house replacement
statistics? Yeah. And like, listen, you and I have both expressed our concerns with Noel, but yeah, they clearly see stuff there, and there was points where we saw stuff there. It's like there's a place for
you want to believe.
There's a place for a Noel Manzardo first base platoon too. Like, that might not be the worst thing in the world. And then again, if you do flip Naylor, it's maybe you do go get Santana, who would cost roughly half and have the same length. And again, it depends what you can get, because I think with all of the players that we saw kind of get qualifying offers and this and that, I think it's going to be hard to get pitching in the free agent market, and trading Naylor might be the best pathway to pitching.
It is. And again, it's got to be up the overall health of the team in terms of roster build, financial fit. Yeah, I mean, we already talked yesterday. We talked on Monday's show about money that's coming off the books. And yeah, if you move Josh Naylor's money off the books, yes, you have to try to find a way to replace his impact in the lineup, and hopefully part of that's Kyle Manzardo. And I think you could still say that Manzardo and Naylor in the same lineup against righties is definitely better, but can you also say Manzardo, Carlos Santana, and a pitcher that they really need? Does that make them a more complete ball club? That's what you have to weigh here in terms of the Naylor decision. And I don't think Fry affects that. Like, I think that's just, again, that's its own thing. And I do think the only thing that changes is if you're going to deal Josh Naylor, you do have to have a contingency plan, right? You do have to consider a Carlos Santana. You do have to figure out a way to replace David Fry's at bats, because you can't trade Josh Naylor and just say, okay, Kyle Manzardo is our first baseman. We'll rotate DH. We'll platoon John Kenson, whatever. I think you have, if you're without David Fry and you trade Josh Naylor, I think you just can't look at house. I think you have to also have an outside contingency plan, and that should be at the very least Carlos Santana or something else. And I think I don't know if there are legs to the Carlos Santana thing, but my guess is I think he'd be interested in reunion, and I don't think it's going to cost them much. And it's like we've been saying, it's a low downside move for them. And I think there might be more interesting moves for them, but I think it's a move that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think when you're going through, it's just I think the biggest take from the news today is that injury was worse than any of us thought it was. That with when Bryce Harper had it, I believe he just had the brace. Ohtani, I think it might have had both parts of the surgery, the brace and the tendon, but he got his in mid-September, and David Fry got his the end of October. So yes, there's a world where Fry can be a contributor to this team, which is going to take a while, especially because he's got to work his way back through into game action. So I guess that really
possibly he can come back and play other positions besides catcher. By the way, catcher is going to be the last thing he does. At this point.
He could maybe play. I don't know. It's
first.
It's probably a first base mostly, or just about only. I think it's just first base DH. But yeah, I think we'll see how much faith they have in his ability to come back by the moves they make. I think that's one of those ways you have to judge it. Yeah,
I think they'll definitely consider how much they believe he can come back and when he can come back. I mean, guys, that happens all the time. Guys come back sooner, but some guys also have setbacks. So, I think it's hard to say exactly at this point what you can expect from his rehab process. He could come back sooner, but he could also, have setbacks, and that's not a good thing either. So we'll see. But yeah, Jeff, that's the best point I think you can make, Jeff, is that based on their offseason moves, we'll be able to tell how they feel about the situation. I just think no matter what you do, you have to come in and bring a contingency plan. And again, if it's Carlos Santana, that has to be a part of it. You can't. I'll be curious to see if they sign Carlos Santana before they trade Josh Naylor, and then you're like, oh, is that the David Fry contingency, or is that moving Josh Naylor? And I would probably say that's Josh Naylor. I'd be curious to see the order of operations of how not just the plans in general, like you said, see what they do to tell us how they feel about David Fry's recovery, but the order of operations of which they do it, right? That's going to be the interesting thing too.
Yeah, and I think one other note I have to make is to use our old friend Tony's favorite thing, roster fodder. They now have roster fodder because that's going to be Fry and Henches, because the minute the season starts, those two guys will go on the 60-day disabled list. So they have this extra room. So we know every year it feels like someone makes this team off of how they play in the spring. So instead of cutting or letting someone go, they are set up for to very easily have it occur now.
Yeah, the roster thing is interesting. Yeah, your David Fry and Daniel and Espino and Henches essentially give you a lot of room to play with in spring training in terms of guys making the roster. And the other piece too from Monday's update too is they brought back obviously Henches and Stefan. They got rid of Karinchak, which we expected them to do. They have 2 open roster spots right now. I think you can clear a third with Conor Gillespie at the very least, and that gives you 3.
Why don't we run to break and come back and talk about this? So we can do the one break.
A little more intrigue and stuff on this bonus episode to get to.
But first, I have to talk about our good friends over at Hims. Who doesn't want to enjoy life more? Who doesn't want to get the most out of all the fun things in your life? Um, Hims is going to help you. Hims is here to provide a service to help you get the best out of your private life, because it's important and your schedule is busy and you don't have time to go to a doctor's office to get treated. Through Hims, you can get personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. Guys, ever feel like you need a boost in the bedroom? It's time to stop worrying about your performance and get Hims, and you can feel confident knowing that you can do what you need to do whenever you're in the mood. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. No insurance needed, one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compound products which are not approved or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with the healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
All right, so they cleared 2 roster spots.
Yes.
Or they have 2 roster spots open right now with Karen Check on and obviously Hedges and Bieber and Boyd and Cobb being all off the roster now. But this is just kind of a precursor to the 40-man talk.
Yeah.
We're talking about they have to add somebody in terms of contingency for the Naylor and Fry thing. But as far as 40-man space goes, some of those we figured out on Monday is they have 2 spots. You and I agree 100% Franco Alamán is on that list. No questions.
Unless they trade him.
Yeah, that's always a possibility because
their bullpen is going to get a little more tighter with the return of Stefan, and maybe there's a world where I think this is going to tick people off because it's the wrong thing because of how it turned out. But it's like I wouldn't be surprised by a Tobias Myers-esque trade where they try to find a little more pitching depth because it is so hard to sign in free agency, and if they can find someone they like. There's some wiggle on the roster. You and I have 3 names that feel likely to protect and only really 3 names. But right now they only have 2 open roster spots. So, and I do think they have made 2 trades the last 2 years. And I'd have to go back to see if even more, but they are active on that day where you have to lock rosters. And I expect they will be active again this year. They love to comb the bottom. I've talked with someone who's a Rays writer who was like, I think that the Rays will be all over Gabby Arias. And I haven't really dug through the Rays system. Maybe we'll do that this week and be like, okay, is there a pitcher that makes sense? We talked about Seattle. We currently have an Emerson Hancock tab open on my my computer to kind of try to drive through numbers there and see, I do think this team is going to chase pitching in some form. I don't know exactly how or where, but I do think we'll see that on top of the 3 guys they need to add.
Please, I'm not interested in Emerson Hancock. Don't speak that into existence. I'm sorry.
Well,
is that a Josh Naylor thing you're talking about?
Yeah, well, it's just the thing with Emerson Hancock is for whatever reason he changed his pitching motion and it hasn't helped him at all. So it's maybe he should go back to what was more effective. And it is kind of interesting if you look at his 2023 and 20. It's small sample size, but it's his Savant data in 24 was atrocious. The 23, it was actually pretty good. And just trying to figure out what he flipped in here, if anything, or if it was just small sample. His arm angle went up this year, and it seemed to have a net negative effect.
Georgia pitchers. That's all I'm going to say.
I mean, Georgia, everything. Let's be very honest.
Yeah.
I mean, Georgia has been a rough place.
But no, Jeff. Charlie Condon was by far the best.
Just had the worst season I've ever seen by the highest paid player in his draft class.
I'm not getting that debate today. Yeah.
No, but the problem with Seattle is they kind of need all their other pitchers, and Josh Naylor is not good enough to net any of their other pitchers. So you have to kind of poke around the edges and try to find what makes sense with any of these guys. But it's funny, and I brought this up off air. You and I talk about Webb, and we talk about Ninkasi a lot because we think that they're likely to add him. But then we don't talk about them as actual pitching depth. We don't view them as guys who are in line to help anytime, in the next 6 months to a year if there's an injury or someone's ineffective.
Which is funny because Peterson and Messick, we talk about them more often, and those guys are behind them in terms of where they are developmentally, or at least by year. I think we view Messick and Peterson with more upside, maybe. Although
100%.
I did have a lot of more hope in both Nikhazy and Webb at one time, and it just I don't know. We'll see. Nikhazy,
I've always been
I'll
more
say
into
this:
Casey.
he did change his pitching motion
did.
this year, and it did help him. I'll be curious to see what adjustments he has to make based off of that. So we'll see. But yeah, this is just a precursor to Rule 5. But they have, like Jeff said, they got 2 spots open now. There's a good chance they're going to clear more. There's a good chance they might, like you said, they could trade Frank Wellman. I don't know. I feel like they won't, because what value does he really carry for other teams? Like, the value is whoever wants to grab him would put him on their 40, obviously, and not go through the Rule 5 process. But Frank Wellman's not getting to the Rule 5 process. Like, there's no way. Either, like you said, either they trade him or they roster him. So there's no chance of that going another direction. If they don't roster Nikhazy and Webb, I do think both of them get taken, whichever one they don't. But they got 2 spots. And like I said, Connor Gillespie is still on the 40-man roster. You can clear that spot. They might clear spots other ways before that. And they've got 2 weeks to do so. So a lot could still be ahead. And, who was the guy last year? They claimed, what was it, Alfonso Rivas? And we kept waiting for him to be the guy, like, oh, they're going to DFA him today so they can make room for so-and-so. And they never would. I wouldn't be surprised if they claim a guy like that this year, just because now they do.
Him and Betancourt were the guys that kind of claimed around this time of year. The Betancourt
thing was so weird, but we didn't know. They didn't know they were bringing back Austin Hedges until we knew. So, I wouldn't be surprised if they claim or they trade for some. Here's the other thing about this too. There are who's the AAA first baseman this year? Are you jumping CJ Kafis to AAA right away? He only had
because it was not the best time in AA, especially towards the end. He definitely kind of wore out.
Mike Caprice is a minor league free agent, but he never became a prospect, and they don't have anybody to play first base in AAA because Noel's out of options. And Manzardo's
Rodriguez out of options or no?
Jonathan? No. Yeah. Last year was his first year on the 40.
That's right. So I wonder if he's a guy where you're like, hey, listen, flexibility, because he's got a heck of an arm, but he's not much of a defender. It's like, you're like, hey, let's try in spring training, get some reps at first. I wonder if they would approach him about.
It would be a waste of his arm, but I don't know. He's just doesn't have any range. I feel like
it's like he doesn't work in the outfield to begin with. So
I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm just looking at the minors now. There's just nobody at first base in AAA right now that makes any sense. If it's not Kafis, maybe they move a first baseman over or catcher over there, but they don't have any catching. So maybe they wind up claiming somebody, but they're going to have to get some first base depth in the offseason, whether it's their trade. It might be a role. Davis De Los Santos come back, right? Yeah, I think he's on Miami's 40.
Yeah, I believe he would be at this point on their 40. But yeah, I don't know what the option is. It's probably, a part-time because you're hoping Kafis moves quickly. But yeah, it's just a situation right now with this team in the 40-man where I am curious. They have occasionally surprised us in the past and not protected guys we thought would be protected, or protected guys that maybe weren't on our radar. But right now, that all those years we've been talking about the crunch, there's not the crunch right now because the 2020 draft was a short one and it kind of alleviated the crunch. There weren't those interesting guys they picked up later, and most of that draft has kind of been.
Thank goodness for Cade Smith.
So yeah, they just don't have the parts, pieces, and concerns as it were like we've had in recent years. Instead, it's kind of an easy one. If Nikhazy hadn't finally kind of wised up a little bit and started to do some changes, be a little bit more open, this wouldn't even be a discussion. So good on him for really taking that step forward. But yeah, it's really only those 3. And I don't know. I don't understand when people bring up Tommy Mace or things like that. I wanted Tommy Mace to work, but it hasn't gotten there. And, like I said, here's what I will say. It's when they are going to lock this down, when they're going to lock up the roster in terms of putting everyone on so we know who's available in the Rule 5. And hey, Connor Gillespie was a minor league Rule 5. Eric Sabrowski was a minor league Rule 5. pay attention to that stuff, because we're seeing more and more of this team being very smart about the minor league section. So while the main one is important, they've actually gotten more value out of the minor league section of it recently. But they always make trades that day. So there's trades coming. There will be trades on the day when they have to lock rosters.
You heard it here first. Go to FanDuel and.
I don't know if they can that deep.
I don't think you can. If you can find someone to let you bet on that, do it.
Yeah, and please let me know, because I want to put in a few bucks.
Yeah. All right. Check out the top 10 biggest draft busts if you haven't already on today's episode, and check out Wednesday, What If Wednesday, the biggest what ifs in Cleveland baseball as far as health is concerned. We said we're going to talk about Addie Joss, Grady Sizemore,
Herb
Adam
Score.
Miller, Herb Score. Yeah, we're going to have all kinds of fun. Sort of, I guess. I don't know if it's fun or not. Well, it'll be more misery is what it is.
People
really.
always
So,
say they want more history, and then we do history episodes and people don't tune in. So if you want history, make sure you're tuning into these episodes.
yeah, otherwise we're going to stop. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
But what won't stop is providing information, being the people to cover this team better than anyone. I'll be cocky. I'll say it. No one's going as much as constantly on every little maneuver. We're giving a bonus episode so we could talk about, all of
David
these
Fry.
additions.
Our
And David
postseason
Fry.
hero, David Fry.
Yeah. So make sure you are tuning in every day. Rate and review, download. It helps. Comment, thumbs up, all that fun jive. Thank you to those who joined for both episodes. Both episodes. You were daily double every day. And go Guardians, go.